Trump just took an axe to education and food aid, with thousands of jobs getting slashed and $1 billion meant for schools and food banks getting blocked. You've got US government employees being ordered to burn and shred classified documents, with many asking what they're trying to hide. The truth about Mr. B's business empire just came out, and the situation and numbers are shocking. And I've got some awesome space and cat news just to take the edge off for you. We're talking about all that and much more. 9 things you need to know today on today's brand new Philip DeFranco Show. You daily dive into the news, how it's being covered, and how people are reacting to it, starting with this. So the Trump administration has now disemboweled the education department, but I mean, they're just getting started. With newly appointed Education Secretary Linda McMahon, the wife of Vince McMahon and WWE executive, completely shuttering the department's offices today while she lays off nearly half its workforce, cutting it down from just over 4,200 people to just below 2,200, with those who got laid off reportedly being put on administrative leave starting March 21st. And notably, when Fox's Laura Ingraham asked her whether this is the first step toward a total shutdown, McMahon replied,
"Yes. Actually, it is, because that was the president's mandate, this directive to me, clearly is to shut down the Department of Education, which we know we'll have to work with Congress, to get that accomplished. But what we did today was to take the first step of eliminating what I think is bureaucratic bloat. And that's not to say that a lot of the folks, it's a humanitarian thing too. A lot of the folks that are there, they're out of a job."
Now with that, as you heard her mention, Trump cannot legally abolish the Education Department without an act of Congress, and Republicans would need 60 votes to bypass the filibuster. But also, last Friday, McMahon told Fox and Friends that Trump was preparing an executive order seeking to eliminate the department, with a draft order reportedly directing McMahon to do everything she legally can to dismantle it while acknowledging the need for Congress to totally abolish it. Now with this, Trump's claim since the beginning is that he's simply handing control over education back to the states, with him saying this morning about the department's workers.
Our Department of Education's maybe more so than any other place, has a lot of people that can be cut. They're, number one, not showing up to work. Number two, they're not doing a good job. We have a dream, and you know what the dream is? We're going to move the Department of Education. We're going to move education into the states, so that the states, instead of bureaucrats working in Washington, so that the states can run education.
But there, you have critics like Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers, saying that misunderstands how the education department actually works.
States and localities control education right now, from graduation standards to curriculum. The department doesn't run anything. What it does is fills opportunity gaps. So we're talking about kids in America, 90% of whom go to public schools. They want to take the funding. It's like robbing Peter to pay for Elon's tax cuts. Don't do this to our American children.
And so as far as what the department actually does, it provides a bunch of unique federal services. Services that include administering student loans and financial aid, dispersing funds for poor kids, homeless kids, and disabled kids, managing college accreditation, enforcing civil rights laws, and measuring student achievement nationwide. But notably, you had a senior official claiming to The Hill that the cuts won't impact student aid, students with disabilities, civil rights investigation, and formula funding to states. Except, we know that's probably not true for at least one of those. With reports noting that the already understaffed Office of Civil Rights suffered particularly steep cuts, with regional centers shuttered or reduced to a skeleton crew. Though we've also heard discussions from the White House about moving certain functions to other departments rather than outright eliminating them, namely handing civil rights to the DOJ, student loans to the Treasury, and disability programs to Health and Human Services. But what we are now also seeing is that regardless of where the cuts happen, the sheer number of them are reportedly overwhelming state unemployment system. This, according to a lawsuit filed by some state attorneys general last week, with it claiming that by suddenly laying off tens of thousands of federal workers without giving them severance or warning state agencies ahead of time, the White House effectively flooded state insurers. So for example, Maryland, which received less than 200 jobless claims from federal workers over the whole first quarter of last year, now reportedly sees 30 to 60 new claims every single day. And the suit says that state investigators have to examine each of those claims especially closely because the workers were laid off for different stated reasons and in such a chaotic manner. So that process would already be time consuming, but the suit adds that many state agencies aren't hearing back from the federal government as they try to obtain the information they need to resolve claims. All of which, it says, has created delays, leaving unemployed workers in financial limbo as many of them wait to see if they can get their jobs back. But these layoffs also aren't the only education-related cuts that we're seeing right now. For example, the Department of Agriculture reportedly slashing over $1 billion in funding for school meals and food banks. With that, including $660 million for the local Food for Schools program and $420 million for a program that provides food to food banks and organizations that reach underserved communities. And all of this as we're seeing things like the Nonprofit School Nutrition Association warning that Congress is considering further cuts. Cuts, including one proposal that would kick an estimated 24,000 schools serving 12 million students students off of the community eligibility provision, which allows high-poverty schools to offer free meals to all students without an application. But a proposal that would strip 1 million students of automatic eligibility for free school meals, and another one requiring income verification with every meal and reduced price meal application. And so with that, you have the nonprofit's president writing in a statement, these proposals would cause millions of children to lose access to free school meals at a time when working families are struggling with rising food costs. Meanwhile, short-staffed school nutrition teams striving to improve menus and expand scratch cooking would be saddled with time-consuming and costly paperwork created by new government inefficiencies. But for now, we're gonna have to wait to see what happens, especially because the Trump administration, at least as of recording, doesn't appear to have commented on all this, except to say that the programs it just canceled, quote, no longer effectuate the goals of the agency. But then from that, in wild entertainment and legal news, a newly released audio recording shows Jay-Z's former accuser saying he didn't assault her and that she was pressured into suing him. Right, that is the latest bombshell allegation that came from a recent ABC News report because, as you might remember, a lawsuit was filed last year accusing Jay-Z of raping a teenage girl alongside Diddy at a party in 2000. And while that lawsuit has since been withdrawn, it's still making headlines because Jay-Z is suing that accuser, identified only as Jane Doe. And now with that, you have Jay-Z's lawyer discussing the lawsuit and doing an interview on Good Morning America where he shared tapes that allegedly depict her admitting the assault never happened and that her lawyer, Tony Busby, told her to make the claim.
But Jay-Z, you're saying he was definitely there? But he had no part in it, or he was just...
He was there.
He was just there, but he didn't have anything to do with any sexual acts towards you. It was strictly
Yeah. He was the one that kind of pushed me towards going forward with him.
with Jay-Z. Busby did.
Yeah.
Do you know why?
No.
Now with this, for his part, Tony Busby denied pressuring Jane Doe into making the claim, and he gave a statement to ABC News saying that is a blatant lie that is directly contrary to all the documentary evidence, with him then providing his own recordings where Jane Doe said she never told investigators this.
They say that they have you on tape denying that Jay-Z assaulted you. Is that true?
No. I don't. I've never said that.
With her then also denying, saying he forced her to levy the accusation, and Busby also provided a statement to TMZ saying the tape is a fraud. They tormented and harassed and tricked that poor woman and took what she said out of context and secretly recorded her. But there you have Jay-Z's lawyer, Alex Spiro, saying the tape where she denied it should speak for itself. Now with that, as far as who she allegedly confessed this to, those two people on the initial tape were private investigators who were associated with Jay-Z. And when ABC News asked if Jane Doe had been coerced into a denial, Jay-Z's lawyer said that was not the case and that she was not coerced or threatened and voluntarily spoke to them. And in Jay-Z's defamation suit against Jane Doe, he argued that her lawyers were, quote, soullessly motivated by greed and abject disregard of the truth and the most fundamental precepts of human decency. And this is notably Busby and his firm are also named as defendants in the suit. You know, with all this, it's worth noting that in a court filing earlier this month, Jane Doe said, quote, although I ultimately chose not to pursue them, I stand by my claims in the New York action and believe that I had a meritorious claim against Jay-Z. As you know, just in the past week and a half, there's been a ton of back and forth here. Busby also previously said that quotes attributed to Jane Doe in the defamation suit against her were fabricated or that investigators spoke to someone who was not in fact Jane Doe. Right, but whichever way this goes, this whole situation right here, it's actually very key, right? Because while you might consider this specific case kind of just a drop in the bucket, considering that there are dozens of other lawsuits that Diddy's facing, as well as a federal indictment that he's pled not guilty to, the claims against Busby specifically here are really notable because he's the lawyer behind a ton of the major lawsuits against Diddy, right? He is a main character in the case at large, right? And so we're gonna have to wait to see where this defamation case goes because it could likely impact or influence other cases, or at the very least, how people perceive those cases. But of course, in the meantime, I'd love to know your thoughts on the situation. But then from that, next up, in interesting business news, have you ever wondered exactly how much money Mr. Beast is making? Because if you have, well, great news. Bloomberg and The Verge just obtained pitch documents that were sent to potential investors that detail some of that, as well as where all his business endeavors are going in the future. Because on top of his YouTube and media empire, he has things like his Feastables chocolate bars, Lunchly, and he owns the platform ViewStats. And he clearly wants to grow, as last week we learned that he was planning an investment round that could value his company at $5 billion. As for where things are right now, you have Bloomberg reporting that Feastables is currently the moneymaker, generating sales of around $250 million with a profit of over $20 million last year. And this notably, as it appears he may have actually lost money on his media ventures, which include his YouTube channel and Amazon series. Right, its sales were comparable to Feastables, but it is said to have lost around $80 million. Though this is Bloomberg noting that it's not too surprising that content like Mr. Beast might lose money, because on average, his videos cost between $3 to $4 million. And you know, making heaps and heaps of money on YouTube, it's not the easiest thing, which is why Amazon picking up Beast Games, it likely helped him to grow the business without having to foot a massive bill entirely on his own. own. Even with that Amazon show, the show reportedly went over budget and the first season lost him money, which is something they previously spoke about, but he hopes that the next seasons will be different.
I lost a ton of money filming the show, so that came out of my pocket.
Really?
Yeah, we spent way too much money on it. I lost tens of millions of dollars on that show.
Really?
Yeah. I'm an idiot. It was about making season 1 as good as possible.
Which I will say, after learning that, it made the scene where if you flip a coin, you double. I don't care if this is a spoiler. Where there's a moment in the show where one of the final contestants can risk their own elimination, but if they flip a coin and they call it right, it doubles the prize pool from $5 to $10 million. And at first, when it doubled from $5 to $10 million and Jimmy dropped to his knees, I was like, oh, he's acting. But now I'm not sure. But, all of that is to say, it's not surprising that there's a big focus on other brands, right? Feastables alone reportedly has over 100 employees now. With us also seeing The Verge adding that Mr. Beast's commerce division saw a net sales increase of 160% from 2023, and it's projected to see a 100% increase this year. And all of this, as a spokesperson told the outlet that Beast Industries is raising money and using, quote, the unique reach of the Mr. Beast platform to build big, sustainable revenue-generating businesses. And that was also echoed by Bloomberg's report, which said that it's clear that the entertainment wing of the company is increasingly a means of selling other products, with them noting that Beast Industries is looking to expand into video games, drinks, and wellness. With the outlet then also talking to Jeffrey Hausenbold, who was hired last year to lead the company, and said, we have an unprecedented platform in terms of reach and fandom. We have the opportunity to launch multiple businesses on the backs of that center of reach and distribution. With him then also revealing, and this was a big thing, that he plans to cut $100 million in costs this year to turn the company into a profitable business, and estimating they'll get to $300 million in profits by 2026. But also, notably, these reports, they're not the only reason that Mr. Beast was making headlines today. Because as it turns out, he and other major creators are leading an upfronts event focused on just creators. Which, if you're not super familiar, the upfronts are when all the major TV networks and streaming services, they give these massive, often star-studded presentations on their upcoming content schedule to advertisers to woo them and secure ad deals. And YouTube's also been doing their own presentation of the upfronts in recent years, but now creators are reportedly hosting one of their own, with The Hollywood Reporter reporting that Mr. Beast, Dude Perfect, Ryan Trahan, and more will have an event to lure marketing dollars from traditional TV to creator-driven content. And this is reportedly the firm Spotter is behind the event, which will be held at the end of the month in front of the marketing leaders of over 150 major brands. With the president of Spotter also saying, for decades, advertisers were about owning hit shows, moments, and attention across broadcast and cable. But then adding, today, the landscape has fundamentally shifted. To capture cultural moments and audience engagement, brands must align with creators who now command the largest and most engaged audiences across digital platforms. Even though this event is separate from YouTube's own upfront, you had Deadline saying that this is not a direct competitor to that presentation, as they both ultimately want increased advertising on YouTube. And so ultimately, it's all very, very big news in the space, and it will just continue. I'm a nerd when it comes to this stuff. Seeing how the industry at hand and those around it have evolved over the last 2 decades, it's been a wild, wild ride. And then we'll get to more news in just a moment, but first, let's be real. What's the first thing we notice about people? Get your mind out of the gutter, their smile, and they notice the same about you. Right? Your smile is fundamental in daily social interactions, and oral care is critical to your overall health, and that's where today's sponsor, Guru Nanda, steps in. Guru Nanda's Total Smile Makeover Kit has everything you need for a bright, fresh, and healthy smile, hassle-free. Their dual-chamber whitening mouthwash is packed with hydrogen peroxide and natural essential oils that activate an oxyburst bubble reaction that whitens teeth and freshens breath. And Guru Nanda whitening strips are gentle on teeth, mixing hydrogen peroxide with coconut extracts, and their patented toothbrush has 8,000 plus ultra-soft, soft-text bristles, perfect for sensitive gums. And then finally, their famous coconut mint pulling oil is a natural teeth whitener, blending 7 essential oils like peppermint, clove, oregano, and tea tree with vitamins D3, E, and K2 supporting happy gums. Guru Nanda uses natural ingredients that are genuinely beneficial for your mouth, no harsh chemicals or bleaching agents. And I can't imagine a better deal for your oral care. For under $40, you're getting naturally, ethically sourced products that whiten without damaging your teeth. So do your mouth a favor and grab the Total Smile Makeover Kit today. Just scan the code on screen or head to gurunanda.com/DeFranco and use code DeFranco for 15% off site-wide. Your coffee-stained teeth will thank you. But then, next up in very interesting news, the U.S. Agency for International Development has ordered its staff to shred and burn classified documents. Right? And this, according to NBC, which obtained an internal email sent by the agency's acting executive secretary, Erica Carr, to an unknown number of employees, with her reportedly thanking workers for their, quote, assistance in clearing our classified safes and personnel documents, and then adding, shred as many documents first and reserve the burn bags for when the shredder becomes unavailable or needs a break. With all of this, reportedly reportedly set to take place Tuesday. Now, to be clear, right, destroying classified documents isn't necessarily bad or illegal, but it can be done during some circumstances, especially emergencies, such as when an embassy is under attack. But seemingly, the only people attacking USAID right now are Elon Musk and his bureaucrats, which is why you had several people familiar with the normal procedure telling NBC this is not that. And notably, with this, you have the plaintiffs in the suit against Trump's effort to dismantle USAID filing an emergency motion yesterday afternoon seeking to stop the document destruction, with them explaining that depending on which documents get destroyed, it could make it extraordinarily difficult, if not impossible, to rebuild programs if their lawsuit succeeds. So that means that even if the courts force Trump to reinstate the agency's programs, over 80% of which he's reportedly ended, he might literally be unable to, with the plaintiffs alleging that Carr's emails suggest a rapid destruction of agency records on a large scale, which both violates federal record-keeping law and could destroy evidence in their case. But then, later on Tuesday, both parties released a joint statement report saying that the government will not destroy additional documents stored in the USAID offices in the Ronald Reagan building without affording notice to plaintiffs and an opportunity to raise the issue with the court. And so hopefully we'll find out exactly which documents were destroyed, but for the moment, at least, the shredder is said to have been turned off. Though this is, you also had one administration official claiming that the material was mostly old courtesy content given to USAID by other agencies, that it was irrelevant to the lawsuit, and that original copies are still on the computer system. But for now, we'll have to wait to see how this actually shakes out. But then, moving on from that, we need to talk about how this alternative medical facility is now being accused of putting money over their patient's safety after a little boy died on their watch. So this is Thomas Cooper. He's a 5-year-old boy from Michigan with ADHD and sleep apnea. And to treat those conditions, his parents were taking him to the Oxford Center, which is an alternative medicine facility in a suburb of Detroit with a hyperbaric chamber, which you know is this pressurized tube-like chamber that delivers 100% oxygen to the patient inside. And that is roughly 5 times the amount of oxygen that's found in plain old air, which makes the chamber highly combustible. Right, and the FDA has approved hyperbaric therapy for conditions like carbon monoxide poisoning, decompression sickness, and scuba divers, and even for some wounds and burns. But also, in recent years, spas and wellness centers have started promoting hyperbaric oxygen therapy as a treatment for a bunch of other health issues. And in Oxford Center's case, they were reportedly advertising it as a treatment for more than 100 conditions, including autism, Alzheimer's, dyslexia, and cancer, despite the FDA not recognizing hyperbaric therapy for any of those conditions. But now, the reason we're talking about this today is that Thomas was in the chamber on January 31st when a single spark reportedly caused the whole chamber to go up in flames, killing Thomas within seconds. His mother then reportedly trying to rush into the fire to rescue Thomas, with the family's attorney saying she has significant burns on her arm and that was done during a rescue attempt to try to get her child out of the burning flame. She was trying to get him out and was unsuccessful, with them then going on to say that the family is planning on suing to make sure that this doesn't happen again and that somebody else doesn't get hurt. Now, with all this, following the explosion and Thomas's death, the location of the Oxford Center was shut down and the authorities began investigating exactly how this happened, which has now led to 4 arrests this week, including the Oxford Center founder and CEO, Tamala Peterson. And arrested along Peterson, you had her primary management assistant, Gary Market, and the company's safety manager, Jeffrey Mosteller. Right, and all 3 of these people got slapped with a second-degree murder charge, and the 4th person was charged with involuntary manslaughter and intentionally placing false information in medical records. With then yesterday, the 4 being arraigned, and Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel giving a scathing news conference. A news conference where she revealed that Thomas's death was preventable, saying the investigation reached, quote, some horrifying and simple conclusions. Right, according to Nessel, the Oxford Center failed to perform daily maintenance checks or even yearly inspections of the equipment. They didn't have a doctor or safety supervisor on site, and they didn't have a licensed tech performing Thomas's treatment. And then on top of all that, Nessel says that the investigation found that they didn't even use a grounding strap for Thomas's treatment, which, as we saw NBC News report, is essential to protect patients and equipment from static electricity, which can cause ignition while in the chamber. With Nessel then also saying the Oxford Center routinely operated sensitive and lethally dangerous hyperbaric chambers beyond their expected service lifetime and in complete disregard of vital safety measures and practices considered essential by medical and technical professionals. With her then going on to accuse the Oxford Center of prioritizing their own wallets over patient care and safety, saying this was an unscrupulous business operating powerful machines beyond their manufacturer's intended term of use on children's bodies over and over again to provide unaccredited and debunked so-called treatments, chiefly because it brought cash into the door. Now, with all this, as far as what's next, 3 of the 4 defendants entered a mute plea yesterday, meaning they remain silent on the charges, which registers in the court as a not guilty plea. And then as far as number 4, that was Jeffrey Mosteller, whose attorney claims he works at a different Oxford Center location, not the one where Thomas died. So he's more directly pleading not guilty. But with that, it is worth noting that the other location for the Oxford Center is also under investigation. Now, as far as the other side of this, right, the Oxford Center itself hasn't responded to any of the allegations, but their attorney did release a statement before Nessel's press conference saying the timing of these charges is surprising as the typical protocol after a fire-related accident has not yet been completed, and saying there are still outstanding questions about how this occurred, yet the Attorney General's office proceeded to pursue charges without those answers. Overall, just a horrific situation. It's going to be very interesting to watch how this plays out, and in the meantime, of course, I'd love to know your thoughts on it. But then And next up in big international news, we need to talk about the situation in Serbia, right? Because months-long mass protests across the country, they've seemingly only gained momentum, right? And the government that they're protesting against, it's one with close ties to the Trump administration. And in fact, it's a government that's even cited the American president's own actions as justification for a growing crackdown on civil society. But with that, starting with the protests, they got going back in November after 14 people were killed by the collapse of a concrete canopy at a railway station, with another woman dying weeks later from her injuries. With protests then quickly springing up as people blamed the tragedy on shoddy work by contractors tied to corrupt officials. And since then, they've been taking place almost every single day, becoming the biggest challenge yet to President Aleksandar Vucic's decade-long grip on power. With last week, for example, even opposition MPs participating by setting off flares and smoke bombs in parliament. And this week, we saw several hundred protesters blocking Serbia's public television station building in the capital, blaming the broadcaster for biased reporting and siding with the government during the demonstrations. Right, and all of this ahead of a major rally that's scheduled for March 15th. But notably, in the past month, we've also seen the government stepping up its efforts to quash dissent, going from blaming foreign-funded NGOs for the country's problems to actually investigating and raiding them. And specifically here, Serbian authorities have sent dozens of police officers, many of them armed, to raid the offices of at least 4 organizations, with them notably conducting the raids without warrants, and perhaps even more notably than that, justifying the action by referring to the Trump administration's dismantling of USAID, as well as its denouncement by Elon Musk as a criminal organization, with seeing the prosecutor who ordered the raids claiming there was concern that recipients of American grants were involved in money laundering since they had used funds tainted by what Musk had said was criminal activity. And Vucic himself, of course, has grabbed onto that narrative as well, with seeing, for example, a Serbian journalist recently trying to ask him about reports linking his son to organized crime groups, and then the president responding by accusing the reporter of working for criminal organizations and asking her, "How much money have you received from USAID?" And with that, again, the targets of the raid so far have only been those groups that the government has accused of orchestrating the student-led protests, not just any that received American money, with one of them, for example, by the name of Civic Initiatives, reportedly providing legal aid to detain student protesters. It reportedly previously received around 10% of its funding from USAID, and it surrendered 1,300 pages of documents as well as thumb drives containing confidential personal information about its staff and finances. With this also saying the executive director telling the New York Times, they are just using what Trump is doing in America against all the people they want to frighten here in Serbia, and adding that President Vucic sees the most powerful country in the world acting like this and has decided he can get rid of people here he doesn't like. Is then an analyst at the Center for Research, Transparency, and Accountability, another one of the rated organizations, said, there used to be red lines beyond which Vucic would not go, but when the US government started demonizing USAID, Vucic decided he can do whatever he wants. Now, with all that said, one of the most wild things about all this is that, the biggest beneficiaries of American aid money in Serbia, it's actually the Serbian government itself. In fact, the prosecutor who is investigating the raided NGOs for money laundering, USAID paid for a trip she took to Italy last year to study the Italian justice system. And beyond that, more than 90% of American aid money to Serbia has gone to government and state-affiliated institutions, including, for example, the National Parliament, the website of which previously displayed the USAID logo and acknowledged that its development was made possible by the support of the American people through the agency. Though, of course, not long after Trump came into office, that's now gone. But notably, despite all that, you have many saying that the Serbian government's actually only growing closer to the US. Right? His son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is building a Trump-branded luxury hotel in the Serbian capital. Richard Grenell, a US special envoy under Trump, he's been said to have close, almost friendly relations with Vucic, and Donald Trump Jr. actually met with Vucic this week for the second time in the past year, with Vucic saying in an Instagram post that the talk showed a commitment to the strengthening bilateral relations and working together to solve global challenges. Really, with all that aside, a lot of this goes to show just how many ways a Trump presidency is having an impact, not just with the United States, but around the world. Right? Because in addition to Serbia, you have the governments of Hungary and Slovakia, whose leaders are both enthusiastic supporters of Trump. They've also taken advantage of the dismantling of USAID to go after opposition. And this notably, even though the agency actually ended most of its funding in both countries after they joined the EU in 2004. But, in any case, you still had Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban last week, for example, accusing foreign-funded groups of trying to topple his government and vow to get rid of them, with him cheering what he said was Trump's effort to drive a stake through the heart of the monster financed by USAID to serve the liberal globalist empire. But, for now, we'll have to wait to see generally what happens in several of these countries, but also specifically with the protests in Serbia. And then I'll get to more news with you in just a moment. But first, do you ever feel like you're being watched online? Like you search for something once and then suddenly ads for it are popping up everywhere? Like it gets creepy. Well, the truth is, there's a massive data collection industry operating behind the scenes, and most of us have no idea how extensive it really is. Are your personal details, full name, home address, email, phone number, being traded by data brokers without your knowledge or consent? But the good news, you have the legal right to demand these companies delete your information, but doing it yourself, it could take years. Right? But enter our fantastic sponsor, Incogni, who helps you take control of your privacy by reaching out to data brokers for you, requesting the removal of your personal data and handling their objections. Right? And they're not just collecting basic contact information, they're tracking shopping habits, search histories, medical interests, even gathering data on your family. One of the ways I noticed this firsthand is when researching a vacation destination and suddenly I started getting credit card offers for travel rewards. Coincidence? I don't think so. With Incogni doing the heavy lifting, I've had my data cleared from hundreds of brokers, saving me countless hours of frustration. So go check it out for yourself and go to incogni.com/DeFranco or scan the QR code and use code DeFranco to get 60% off. That's incogni.com/DeFranco and use code DeFranco to take your personal data off the market. But then, next up, shifting gears from that, I've got some awesome and funny weird news. And I say funny weird in why is NASA so awful at naming things? And maybe it's because I always think of everything in terms of marketing. You have to get something that really lands in someone's head. It's quick, it gets to the point. But NASA, they're like, no, fuck all that. Let's call our new mission Spectrophotometer for the History of the Universe, Epoch of Reionization, and ISIS Explorer. Also, different ISIS. But past the name, which I'm gonna be calling SphereX for short, this thing's fucking awesome, and I wanna tell you about it. Because NASA has been working on this bad boy for about a decade, pouring $500 million into it, and it finally launched yesterday. And as far as what it actually is, NASA itself has dubbed it the Cone of Fame and the Gorgeous Jewel, but to be clear, it's a space telescope. Though not just any space telescope, it is different than the ones we have in orbit right now. Because the two big ones, Hubble and Webb, they're really great at zooming in really close on particular corners of the universe and taking high-resolution photos. But as NASA explains, some questions like how much light do all the galaxies in the universe collectively emit can only be answered by looking at the big picture, which is what SphereX is designed to do, with the agency planning to photograph out the entire celestial sky 4 times over 2 years in 102 infrared colors, more than any other mission before it, with it hopefully capturing more than 450 million galaxies in one humongous 3-dimensional map. And so then, if it pinpoints something of scientific interest, it can direct the more targeted telescopes to that spot. And then, together, they'll look to answer questions about the history of our universe, particularly what happened in the first billionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second after the Big Bang, which scientists believe is when the universe exploded outward by a trillion-fold in a process known as cosmic inflation. Why or how it expanded outward, assuming that's what actually happened, is a riddle that has bedeviled, befuddled, and even confounded our awesome smart nerds for some 40 or 50 years now. And mapping out the distribution of galaxies throughout the observable universe, it could help them trace the history and therefore the physics responsible for it. Also, if you're someone that's been into the nerdier segments of this show, you'll be happy to learn that this mission could help resolve the Hubble tension, which we did a deep dive on. I'll link to it in the description. But in a nutshell, it's the debate about exactly how fast the universe is expanding, and getting more precise measurements of stars and galaxies' distances from Earth, it could help nail that down. And then lastly here, I'll say that SphereX will study the origin of water and other organic materials in the Milky Way galaxy, which could help scientists figure out how life evolved on Earth. Or as the acting director of the astrophysics division at NASA put it, it's going to answer a fundamental question. How did we get here? If we can figure that out, then maybe we can find clues about where to look for life elsewhere in our galaxy. With NASA saying that SphereX will search for the basic building blocks of life, such as water and carbon dioxide and the interstellar clouds of gas and dust where stars and planets form. Right? And so with all this, after several postponements, the telescope finally launched atop a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California last night.
3, 2, 1, mission.
With also another NASA mission hitching a ride with that one known as Punch, which brings us back to the naming of it all, polarimeter to unify the corona and heliosphere. And it's sending up 4 satellites that are designed to get overlapping views of the sun, creating a 3-dimensional picture of its corona as it transforms into solar wind and blows throughout the solar system. Which, very cool, but the big thing here is the sexy-ass telescope. Right? Because with this growing fleet of insanely powerful space telescopes, including Hubble, Webb, and now SphereX, showing us more of our universe than we've ever seen before, we're bound to witness mind-blowing discoveries during our lifetimes. But then, next up from that, let me give you your good news story of the day. So this is Catherine Kiefer. She's 82 years old, and her family house was burned to ash in the LA wildfires earlier this year. And the day that the fire actually hit her neighborhood, she was at a doctor's appointment, so her kids went to her house to gather what they could and rescue her Maine Coon Aggie. And you see, Aggie was a gift to Catherine from a friend during the pandemic, and they had gotten incredibly close. But Aggie was also prone to hiding, so when Catherine's kids showed up at the house, they couldn't find her. With Catherine's daughter, Caroline, telling the AP, the one thing my mom asked was, did you get Aggie? And in the 2 months since the fire, they thought Aggie was gone. But then, just this last weekend, Catherine got a call from the West Los Angeles Animal Shelter, and it turns out that Aggie had been found by an animal control officer close to what was her home. Yeah, she was matted, burned, weak, and malnourished, but she was alive. And so Catherine goes down there and she gets reunited with her cat, and Caroline recorded the whole thing and put it on TikTok.
She's such a sweetheart. The sweetest girl. Hi, Aggie Kitkin. Oh, I'm so, I never thought I'd to see you again. She is a sweetheart. I've been sitting with her all day. Oh, you have? I have. She's the sweetest. You want to hold her?
You're kidding.
Oh, baby. I'm so happy to see you. Hi, baby.
With that video not only getting millions of views, but the family's GoFundMe has raised over $27,000 for Aggie's vet bills. And as for Catherine, she says she just feels incredibly lucky to have found Aggie again, telling Fox LA, "I didn't think I'd ever see her again. There's just such a connection. It's sort of like you have with your children." She really means, I don't want to say everything, but that's the only word that comes to mind. I just didn't think I'd ever really get past losing her. That cat really has 9 lives. Just don't give up hope. Don't underestimate cats. And so there you go, a little flash of hope, a little flash of joy, a silver lining to an otherwise bad situation. But then let's end today with a congratulations and let's talk about yesterday. Starting with a congratulations to Terry S., SeatGeek's latest weekly winner, who scored $500 in tickets and is now weighing her options, an Avril Lavigne concert or a Cubs game. You know, whichever you do, I hope you have a fantastic time. But also for everyone else, that's right, SeatGeek is still giving away $500 in tickets, and you should definitely enter today if you haven't already. I mean, imagine being the next winner and snagging $500 towards seeing your favorite artist, sporting event, or play. I mean, y'all, there's over 70,000 events to choose from. And all you gotta do is just add code PDS to your SeatGeek app profile for a chance at the weekly $500 prize, no purchase necessary. So get in on it. It is a win-win, but like I said, let's talk about yesterday in some commentary. Starting with Common's conversation and reactions to Donald Trump. With FEMA Trailer writing, the fact that a sitting US president can publish a communication to the American people using the wrong form of the word "your" without anyone stopping him is absolutely wild to me. To which I'm gonna respond, guys, that's wild to you? You've seen everything since 2016 and you're like, "You're?" Well, actually, we are past. Oh, did you see that he tweeted "Covfefe"? You know, if anything, I think there's a chunk of the population, rightly or wrongly, that like the fact that he's just popping things off like a regular person. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is this is a little bit of a different version of words are words, actions are actions. Words matter. Definitely, especially when you're talking about the leader of a country. But actions are more important, and there's a lot of actions that are more deeply concerning right now than spelling errors. Then also regarding Trump, Canada, and the tariffs, you had Notmax saying, "Canada's response to the tariffs makes perfect sense, and I appreciate them separating the American people who will suffer from this and Donald, the one who caused this, that'll never be impacted by dumbass decisions like this. Not excited to see how corporations that'll jump at this opportunity to wring more out of an already struggling middle class. Yay!" But then also, in addition to that, there were a decent chunk of comments and conversations happening around the H3 CPS situation. And interestingly, there was a decent chunk of focus on the whole, like, when you're 3 years old, you don't remember things part of the situation, which it felt like it was standout in that it was just a bizarre, weird argument, but it was also kind of separate from the main issue at hand. Right? Ryan Gallagher saying kids don't form memories is a terrible defense, considering that the trauma that one doesn't remember from childhood has been proven to be the most impactful trauma, as well as you're not really forming your memories at 3. Dude, yes, you are. You may not actively remember it, but your body sure as hell does from the time you're an infant till you're an adult. It remembers it even if you can't retrieve those memories. Which again, I just want to emphasize, I think is an incredibly stupid argument. It's kind of a callous sort of way to think about it, but that is miles apart from being like, yeah, I'm glad that person got a fake CPS call on them. And to that point, you had people in the comments sharing their own CPS horror stories. Folks like Crystal claiming, "Years ago, my own mother called CPS in the health department because I shut her down. Rather than adding, she drunk dialed these services and CPS showed up at her door at 3 a.m. in the health department later that same day. Nothing came of the call, but neither entity would leave until they saw my then 3-month-old son, whom at the time was colicky and barely slept. When CPS came at 3 a.m., my son was asleep for all of 12 minutes and then cried and wouldn't sleep for 2 hours more. He slept for a whole 3 hours before the health department arrived in the morning. All of this because my mother was petty. She was constantly threatening to take my son via grandparent rights. There's not a snowball's chance that was ever going to happen, but what a sick person. Suffice it to say, she is not present in our lives." You also had others adding claims like, "I work for CPS in a support role." You would be surprised how often these types of calls happen. Just so everyone knows, it is a felony to file a false report, and adding kids remember so much more than they let on. And again, something I mentioned yesterday and something I'll repeat here, my focus is on fake CPS calls, right? Because we have seen instances with online creators where CPS got involved and it needed to happen. With, probably one of the most high-profile examples being the Ruby Frankie situation, which, we've covered in detail. It was just a fucking nightmare situation. And that also ends up being part of the concern, because if there's this increase in bullshit CPS calls, especially regarding creators, then those who are actually guilty of something can point and go, we're one of those. But that, my friends, you beautiful bastards, is where your Wednesday show is gonna end. But of course, with that, remember, I've got a brand new show for you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Thank you for watching. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.